Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends, your dearest friends, we gather together after sharing a day of adventuring, and we create for you the most magnificent stories. I'm, of course, Levi.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. No read today, but just Seth and I think we'll hold down the fort just fine. What story element did you have, Seth?
I had magic system.
Cool. I have economic system, and I think we talked about this a few minutes before we started. Seth's going to start.
All right. So once upon a time, there were 3 bears.
Yes.
All right. So the magic system, kind of mulling it over all week, had a couple things going on. And then this morning, someone notified me that I had one of my magic cards fall out of my Bible. And and then we kind of, the way that we do things, made some jokes about, the significance of that and what I might be, secretly toting it around in my Bible for in case it was something. And of course we had to read it. So anyway, so the magic system is going to be slightly based off of what we were talking about. Or not, I don't think you were there, but I think it was Isaac.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's going to be kind of based off that, and then a little bit of stuff that I've added to it to kind of flesh it out. So
let's hear it.
So the magic system is, the cards, right? Except, there's, your standard decks. And it doesn't have to be like magic, like maybe the magic cards like that, but the same concept of like these different things being on the cards, and there might be like a creature or an artifact, or the one that fell out was like a destroy artifact, but you had to pay like a kicker to do so, and something like that. And so, it's kind of like, a common game system, throughout, whatever. So you can like play these different things, but then also kind of came into mind, I think it's in Lightbringer, right? So 9 Kings.
Yeah,
right?
Which is supposed to be like a copy of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, and I just kind of thought of that too when we sat down to record. I'm like, oh, actually, you know what? Some of this is actually kind of like that. So I might as well kind of say that, if this doesn't seem like all that original idea, or if it does seem really cool, then go read The Lightbringer by
Brent Weeks.
I almost said Sanderson, but that was definitely wrong.
Yeah.
So Brent Weeks, very good book. But anyways, so some of these cards, though, are a more high value card, right? They're charged with power. And, there's different ways to charge them. But before you can charge one of these cards, it has to be of the, the highest grade, of the top lined paper that is, the most paper, like our dollar bill is actually made more out of like what we would, like your blue jeans are closer to a dollar bill than a sheet of paper. So it's like a very specific kind of thing. So it's not your everyday thing. It's like minted, but like, again, not too many people probably know where it is. It's like a heavily guarded secret. But if you can get your hands on some of these, high grade cards, then graded that, the paint and the, the material that's gone into them is all of the right, purest quality. The way that they get charged to then hold any kind of magical value is like on different events. So like it'd be like an eclipse,
right?
Or like if you're familiar with what a blue moon is, so that if I'm thinking of it right, would be like a full moon that comes in twice inside of the same month period.
Yeah, I think that's what that is. So like the whole once in a blue moon.
Right. So it's like, cosmic events that are, beyond, an oddity, right? So it's like an eclipse or like a full moon, but not just any full moon. It'd have to be a full blue moon, or a blood moon or
harvest moon.
Or a harvest moon.
Yeah, worm moon or whatever.
And so different things like that, will kind of charge them to their thing. And so you might have like in this case that we kind of used this morning, it was, a destroy artifact, I think it was. And so then it was like, oh, you're carrying those around and, so almost like, concealed carry. So if someone comes in up, to, shoot the place up, you could just, whip the card out and be like, destroy artifact. Now they don't have their weapon.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so that was kind of part of what inspired it. And so it's like stuff like that. And so it's
so that's how it's used in this world?
That's how it's used. And so it's I would say there's a lot of these cards, but again, like once you use them, they'd have to recharge. But like the events that would actually charge them to hold any kind of power, like things that are few and far between. And so if you're just using them willy-nilly, it's kind of a waste.
Right.
But so I kind of in my mind imagining some kind of like, hermit geek. Maybe he's the wise old man later on, and he's like, got like a trench coat or like his robe, and he's just got like stacks, and he's like this old guy, and he's been like charging them up, and he's like been collecting them, or like they go in duel or something, and then he'll like, collect everybody else's, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's kind of fun. I would say that's cool. That's cool. I had this. So as you were talking, my brain was churning over and over for economic system. And so I'm thinking that this is, since we're also in the world building phase here, this is kind of a post-apocalyptic system, right? Maybe this power is what tipped the world over the edge, or maybe, this power emerged from the world being tipped over the edge. And the economic system is 144,000 androids, right? They're about 10 feet tall, 10 feet wide. They sort of are semi-human shaped. They walk really slowly, and they're always constantly on the move. And they kind of fully saturate the earth, and they're always kind of moving in a predictable pattern, right? And they follow things like day cycles. If it's like, if you see one, and it was the new moon yesterday, and you take a piece of chalk as he's walking by your village, and you mark off his leg, make a little X on his leg or something as he's walking by. 1 year in the future, he will be walking by. It'll be the same one, right? So it's like this really regulated pattern. And that's what helped, as far as economic systems, that's what helped humanity sort of synchronize again. Because all of these robots who no one remembers what they were originally intended for are sort of doing this. They also contain a network connecting all of them, right? And this was found out through various means. There's no weapons people have that can hurt them. There's some firearms left, but they always, like any town or person who attempts to attack them, you just never hear from again. So people aren't really sure what they do. But then at night, they kind of set up, right? They wherever they are at night, they sit down and like lights come out from them, and they kind of turn into a kiosk. And you go up to them, and you can exchange minerals, the rarer the mineral, the better, for information, right? So this is where we rediscovered how to make cement, right? Because they brought a chunk of cement to one of these and broke it up and put it in his little input slot, and he gave them the ingredients for how to make it, This is where we learned, we ordered seeds, and then in 1 year he was back, and he had a bunch of heirloom preserved in shrink-wrapped plastic seeds of the type that you wanted, right? So this is the economic system. You trade things to these kind of dissident creatures, and you get back the things you're asking for. No one really knows like who made them, where their stockpiles are. People have tried to turn them into fighters. People have, warlords have captured them and tried to like turn them into guard dogs for their castles. And it just doesn't work. And so there's like there's kind of a mystery as to who made them. What are they here for? Why are they here? Right? And we're just far enough now into the apocalypse that humanity is starting to turn over, and what we've forgotten where they came from. Now, here's the one thing. I just read 100% Lunar Boy, which you should read. Isaac recommended it to me, and it was this really interesting story about this kid who lives on the moon, who's I forget his name, but it's a funny name. But he's called what's called a 100% Lunar Boy, which means his eyes the color of his eyes are the fourth primary color, right? So to look at his eyes, your brain just like shuts off because it doesn't understand what it's looking at. So he has to wear these goggles all the time so that no one can see his eyes because, of that. But robots just don't recognize the color, right? Because you say, oh, it's the fourth primary color. And the robot says there's no such thing as a fourth primary color. So in the same way, this magic system, you can't bring one of these cards to these robots and get them to dissect what it is. They just don't recognize that it exists. It means nothing to them. It's just a piece, a thing. It's just an unknown. So there's something blocking them from being able to recognize it, and their origins might be similar. They might have been programmed not to be able to see it, or they could be some kind of golem situation where they're powered by because they keep time just like the cards need specific lunar events in order to recharge. So that's just a thing that can be explored. And they're incredibly passive. Like they don't, if you try to stand in front of them, they'll stop for a little. Like if you put a log in front of their path, because they've been walking this path now that like the paths they walk on are the paths that everyone uses because, so if you block the path, they'll like stop and then you'll blink and they'll be like beyond the path and continuing to walk. It's just, the technology is so far away. And the only reason why people believe it's technology and not magic anymore is because we're still close enough to the apocalypse that people remember that, but it's starting to turn over. Especially with the magic system, I think. It's starting to turn over into like these things are also magical. So that's the economic system.
Cool.
Yeah. And people have like named them. I have this kind of image that like some of them, have been damaged. So one of them has like a certain dent. And so his name is just Dent, and so they'll just know, oh, that's Dent, and people kind of count their age by like, well, how old is your daughter? It's like, oh, Red Arm was here, right? Because it's that one guy who has the arm that's like painted red for some reason. And it's like, oh, Red Arm. Oh, you were here you were born during a Red Arm year? Wow. And it's like this kind of lore gets built up about like which robot was passing, even though functionally they're all pretty much the same, but they, just like human beings will pull out character out of just kind of consistency. If there's just little tiny slight differences, the same thing happens here. And because people's lives are not meaningless, but pretty mundane as far as like the passage of time, these, it's like it's market day, a robot's coming kind of thing.
Okay, so I have an idea.
Let's hear it.
With, I don't know, I think Wise Old Man is something that comes up later, but I think this Wise Old Man character that I've got is one of the things that he figured out. So these things don't recognize these cards, right?
Right.
And he doesn't know and he's like, I don't know, kind of this like, I mean, obviously he comes into town and people know him, but he's like kind of this weird, kooky guy. But one of the things I think he does is he's like almost a scientist as well, like where he keeps like he's trying different things. And he knows well enough that he can't like follow one of these things or attack it. Obviously, he's kind of like realized like, oh, Red Arm, right? So someone had to paint his arm, right? Okay, this one's got a dent, right? This one girl he saw, put the X, on its leg, right? And so it's like, okay, obviously this girl's still around or whatever it was. And so it's like, obviously there can be that interaction. So what if I just went and like threw the satchel on him, right? With these cards. Right. And so like, that's one of the things he's doing now is like, then they'll come back and like, they'll have the satchel, right? Cause like you can't really, attack. Or like somehow like, or like he'll tape one like to the back, but like put it in something where it's like the same color and he'll like attach it. And so either he's trying to figure out now if there's something with them that is charging these things.
Right.
Or if it's just because if they're going all over the place, right? So, I mean, because it's like, the solar and the lunar things, but I'm thinking too, like if there's like a tornado, right? Like if one had gone through a tornado, it'd be like supercharged, right?
Right, because it's atmospheric stuff.
Because it's all like these weird like phenomena stuff, right? And so if like, like let's say if like in this case, like, I mean, remember Katrina, not that anyone listening to this in like, 200 years is going to, maybe remember what Katrina was, Bush out there in his little Kappa suit, planting, whatever to make the levees fall, it's all, I think that was an Onion years ago.
Yeah.
It's like new evidence find. Anyways. But, so that's what he's found out. So like these things, they go over, right? So they're all over the place. So he's either trying to figure out if these things are charging in a rate of being near these things, because of what he's found out is like, okay, so like again with like magic cards, you got the different colors or you have like different elements, right? So one that's going to be in a tornado, right? If it's hinged with the right one, like something with wind or something like that, it'll be it'll be like supercharged that way, right? And if one is like, comes through and is like soaked with the water from a hurricane, right? It's going to be like this mix of wind
or from the ash of a volcano.
Right. And so he's like kind of like I can see in his lab and he's like, got all these cards and he's like running these tests and he's like, like trying to figure out, okay, it's like their residue from like these golem things that are charging them, Or like, what's the difference between one that, maybe hasn't seen something, or like he's then like running the test, like, okay, this one's obviously gone through a tornado. This one's, this guy, he walked through a forest fire, and this kind of like supercharged this other one, right?
Right.
But then, like trying to figure out if like maybe these things themselves are emitting something that is also charging them, or like,
Right, because that's the huge question is, are these things technology or are these things mystical? Because they seem to be technology when they sit down and sort of turn into a kiosk and you can walk up to it and, push buttons, and people are already forgetting like what letters and stuff mean, so it's getting like, I can see this kind of getting more and more difficult with each passing year, and they kind of change from being like, oh, it's the regular messenger robot, to strange traveler from, wizards golem from the east is coming. It's like, it goes from being like, oh, the traveling robot's in town, to it is time for the sacred ritual when the silver man comes and sits and we push the buttons and get the product. This just kind of slow, because you can imagine in a post scarcity society being able to have just like instead of having cameras on corners, if you just had patrolling robots that just walked everywhere and like picked up garbage, incinerated garbage, arrested people, recorded things, gave people directions, was able to sell people things, was able to provide people, homeless people with like food or whatever. It's just like this kind of all around public service robot. And then just put it into the Middle Ages. What would people think? They would think something crazy is going on,
I would like to think that maybe there's like a clerical class, because I was thinking too, like with the robots. Have you ever seen Wall-E?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so like the way that they talk, and it's like that. It's the way that you'd almost think that robots would talk, right? It's like a lifeless, like it's like wow, where it's like it's done out of more like the 8-bit sound that
Right.
it's creating, and so it's like that, that idea of like just listen to one of the older ones, and that's why I thought of it too, because it was one where like I think the one that's like the world is burning. There's this skeleton guy and he's smoking.
Yeah.
And like it's burning, and like the restaurant's on fire, and he looks and there's like a no smoking sign, kind of on the burning wall, and he's like chuckling and he's laughing. But the idea is like he's like this skeleton, and so like the air drawing was like kind of like what it would be, but it's not like,
yeah, it's not the actual
thing. And so I think that, like again, like at first, right, if it was speaking Latin, and there's several people that might have known Latin, they could kind of get the idea of what these things might be saying, or what the letters might mean connected with the sounds.
Yeah.
And so it'd be, I don't know, it'd be kind of funny if there's like this clerical class where they're like, it's the ancient tongue, but instead of like actually saying, like if we're speaking in English, it'd be, like seeds, it'd be seeds.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, it's like we have to like, tell it what we want. And so like they'll go up and like, because it might be voice activated, so like, being seeds,
Yeah.
And so it's like I can see how then they're like that, and it's like, oh, the ancient tongue, like the magical language. And so it's like, and then like, have to like speak it just right, and
right.
And yet like them, like if they're technology or something, like they'll understand, like, okay, because they're getting like the inflection of it.
Right.
But then like you said, like they make this big pomp, and like, it's like, oh, and then like the village, shaman or priest who, knows like the ancient lingo, has to come and decipher. It's like, okay, what do we need? These, these things. And then he can read what it is, like, okay, and then can like half translate it. And then he has to like speak in like the ancient, magical tongue, being seeds.
I like it. I think it's an excellent. We don't have a villain or a hero, but it's an excellent premise for a story. I think we should figure out and establish like why. So we should decide right now, so that we don't have to decide next time, if the magic system was around before the end, if it caused the end, because it'd be crazy if there were cards that were charged by nuclear bombs, right? They would be some incredibly powerful cards, and there could be like, 10 of them or 12 of them that exist, that were charged. My brain all of a sudden just said there could be 144,000 of them. And each robot is a golem that has one of these cards inside of them. And it's not that they can't see them, it's that their programming has told them to ignore and record them. But that doesn't have to be the case. So what do you think? Before or emerged after the Great War or Apocalypse or whatever?
I would have to say that it was something that probably started before, as let's say people started messing with like, I don't know, like quantum physics and mechanics and
right,
different things like that, and then they trying to like and whether or not it itself is what caused it all, or maybe they were trying to get that idea right, and so they were like trying to get the purest things, and that's why that part of it is important. I could see like some kind of secret operation, but then after everything falls apart they realize that, oh my goodness, like after like I don't know, I know they're talking about like what is it, Yellowstone kicking off,
right,
and the residual outcome from that, if that went off, you could probably see like the San Andreas Fault falling. There's another one up by Seattle and like Portland, somewhere up there, that they said was like due for a massive one that's actually worse than what they are supposing the other one. And so then you have the Ring of Fire, and you have one kicks off another, which kicks off another. Right. And so now you have all this stuff that they started testing. They had some stuff, but now this kicks off. And then like the people who survived in the know, with that understanding, then we're like, man, like this thing that then it kicked around the Ring of Fire, which then, like, I don't know, maybe shifted Australia 30 degrees north, or, like.
Right. Part of my brain said that we basically were in a fight with AI, right? So we created AI. And we were in a fight with them, right? The world was kind of in conflict. And sort of similar to Dune, the whole concept of thinking computers that were set up with like the ability to adapt, were outlawed. And so people did like a hard pivot and tried to sort of create something else, right?
Like a natural mechanics.
Yeah, it was like, okay, we can't. Oh, here's an idea. Oh, wow. What an idea. This might be totally stupid, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Okay.
So they realized that the internet, the infosphere, was totally compromised, right? So what they did is they, instead of doing their computations on a computer, they went into the atmosphere and were able to replicate complex mathematical equations with large scale atmospheric control, right? So they were basically able to use large scale atmospheric control to test, because you use, one of the big things you use computers for is for like modeling. Like, here's a reaction. Now, how would this reaction work 100 times over, or 1,000,000 times over,
or
10
other inputs, or this?
Yeah. And basically they took that, and instead of doing that on a computer scale, and maybe somehow the AI were able to just like, as a quantum connection, connect to all of the computers, like regardless of if they were not connected to the network. So they basically, as an experiment, did this huge chemical reaction based test to basically test their proof. Maybe it was like they wanted to create a Faraday cage that would surround the whole world, therefore scrambling AI's ability to communicate, and then we would systematically cut off the hard cables going over the Pacific Ocean, that's going across, and would cut off this hard cable. It was supposed to be this kind of test that took place in the Mojave Desert, to see if this would work, right? But what it did is it created this kind of atmospheric chain reaction. And then when the AI looked at the reaction, they basically like read what was going on using their satellites and stuff, and then kind of shorted out. Like, they couldn't understand what was happening. And so we won the war, right? The chain reaction. So one of the things that Oppenheimer was afraid of when they were going to test the nuclear bomb is that there was a non-0% chance that the reaction that they would start would not stop, and it would ignite the entire atmosphere of the world on fire, right? And he actually spoke to Einstein about it, and they were kind of he was going to go forward, and they said, well, what's the percentage of this happening? And he said it's not zero, but they did it anyways, and thankfully it didn't do that. But that sort of thing happens, right? Where they test out this sort of manufacture of this atmospheric event, and that kind of this atmospheric event cascades around the world, cooking the AI because they're looking at it and they don't understand. Therefore, AI now, when it looks at these cards and the atmospheric properties that they have, can't see it, don't understand. There's this movie, and I don't remember what the movie's called, but in it, they're battling robots, and they have a dog, a pug, and they can defeat the robots because they show the robots the pug, and the robots can't decide if it's a loaf of bread or a dog, right? So they short out because they say dog, bread, dog, bread, dog, bread, and they fry. It's like a cartoon, and it's supposed to be like a thing, but that sort of thing happens, right? And so it isolates the earth, right? Causes this crazy atmospheric thing to happen, right? Maybe the atmospheric reaction binds to some material that the cards are made out of, which is what allows them to have their specific properties, or there's a magical element that arises or something, but then the AI is kind of defeated all at once, just cut off the map, but then there's still residual kind of things like these 144,000 messenger robots that are just, this used to be an army, or it used to be a supply, division, but now they just roam around the world, and the atmospheric stuff is so full that they're just constantly confused. So they just walk along their predetermined path, sell their stuff, resupply somewhere at some underground bunker somewhere. They resupply. What do you think about that?
I like it.
Cool. I like it too. I think it's an excellent place to start. We can come up with a hero and a villain and a hero sidekick and get into more of the personality stuff. I think Reed's going to have a good time with this one. I know his story element, and so it's going to be really good. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you liked this episode, please tell us on Twitter. Our tag on Twitter is @GetsBettercast. If you prefer sort of a more long-form discussion,
send us a postcard.
Send us a postcard at, what's your address, Seth? No, send us a postcard at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. And until next time, just hold on, guys. It's going to get a lot more good. Bye.